Hello, I'm the Reverend Dr. Ken Samuro, Jr., interim pastor at St. Luke's in Sydney, dean of the Foothills Conference, and member of the Racial Justice Task Force, the Upstate New York Synod. Some information from 1962 until 2019, there have been 850 pastors who have come through the Lutheran Church in America and now the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Of those pastors, 15 have been of African descent. Through all those years, there have been roughly 150 female pastors, the balance male, and of these pastors, 2 also have been East Asian and 1 Southern Asian. Looking at the progress of the Upstate New York Synod through these decades, we have seen so few pastors of color, so few in congregations, and many who did not remain very long in this synod and served only a brief period of time in a parish. I'd like to introduce Pastor Max Smith, Racial Justice Task Force co-chair, Upstate New York Synod.
Good morning, Dr. Samaro, and thank you. Welcome, delegates. And I would just like to be able to reflect on the title of our present workshop on which we will be presenting before you this day. And it's entitled The Untold Story from the African Descent Perspective. And a little bit about the workshop. The Racial Justice Task Force seeks to share the untold story of African American descendant leaders in the ELCA and their predecessor bodies. This workshop that you're now a part of will include the history from 1964 to the present, along with testimonies and statistics. Our hour together will also include ethos conversations, discussing theological aspects of anti-racism work in addition to conversation around a corporate confession, acknowledging the sinfulness of racism, and commitments to doing the work of dismantling systematic impact on and in the church. So I hope, again, brothers and sisters, let's get started on our conversation. Thank you.
Hello, I'm the Reverend Dr. Ken Samuro, Jr., pastor as interim at St. Luke's in Sydney, dean of the Foothills Conference, and member of the Racial Justice Task Force of the Upstate New York Synod. A few pieces of data for your consideration. There have been, since 1962, almost exactly 850 pastors who have come through the Upstate New York Synod of the Lutheran Church in America and the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Of those 850 pastors, only 15 have been of African descent, and many of them only stayed a very brief time in the synod and moved on. I'd like to introduce to you at this time the Reverend Max Smith, who is the co-chair of the Racial Justice Task Force.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Ken. Good morning, delegates, and welcome to our workshops. I'd just like to proudly say that I am retired. God blessed me with 40 good years, which I'm celebrating this year. A word about our workshop. It is entitled The Untold Story from the African Descent Perspective. A little bit about our workshop. Racial Justice Task Force seeks to share the untold story of African descent leaderships in the ELCA and the predecessor bodies. This workshop that you have now enrolled in will include history from 1964 to the present, along with personal testimonies and statistics. Our time together this afternoon includes an ethos conversation, discussing theological aspects of anti-racism work, in addition to conversations around the corporate confession acknowledging the sinfulness of racism and commitments to doing the work of dismantling the systematic impact on and in the church. And some of you might be asking, well, just who is the Racial Task Force? A word. The Racial Task Force had its beginning in the spring of 2020. And that was way before the death of George Floyd and prior to the postponement of the 2020 Upstate New York Synod Assembly. And asked by Bishop John Marcos, serving at his leisure, we are working and still working, number one, to assemble an anti-racism and bias training curriculum for every congregation's use. We want to provide an opportunity for our Synod via the Synod Assembly to gather and hear the experiences of being Black in the ELCA, to confess our participation in systematic racism in the United States and in the ELCA and our predecessor bodies, and covenant together to do the hard work of eradicating systematic racism and racial bias in our church and throughout the world. And also, we're also now, as a Racial Task Force, we are working hard to gather and archive anti-racism resources for individual congregational use, and you will find that on our website. Currently, as of this date, the task force continues to write an initial anti-racism training on the foundation of institutional systematic racism. We are also offering support for congregations that are in crisis and providing resources upon request for any congregation ready to go deeper in their anti-racism work. As I mentioned before, I invite you to please check out the Racial Task Force website, where we have hundreds of resources that's both personal as well as congregational use that you will find great and helpful. We continue to work with the bishop and the Synod Council leadership to write effective resolutions, which would require congregations to participate in anti-racism, racial bias training, and to provide authority to the bishop to be able to reinforce. 5, in response to congregations and clergy in crisis due to racist behavior within the congregation or the community in which we serve. And on many occasions, we've had to answer that call and attended those congregational meetings and conference meetings. 6, we are also exploring and expanding a Lutheran theology around public safety and policing to inform our advocacy for reimagining public safety and the restoration of justice work. And last but not least, the Racial Task Force, even to this day, as I speak, we are in congregational training curriculum. We are still working, and we are hoping and praying that by the fall of this year, 2021, we will have a curriculum that is ready to be shared with every congregation upon the request, based upon the training that we gave to both Bishop Marcos, the Synod leadership, in the fall and in the summer of 2020. Again, we appreciate your support, but most important of all, we appreciate the support by our Bishop John Marcos, his Synod staff, the Synod Council, for this essential work in our church. And I respectfully submit this to you from Pastor Lee Miller, who is a co-convener along with myself, the Reverend Dr. Julius Carroll, the Reverend Tara Eastman, Mrs. Sharon Hamilton, the Reverend Miranda Hammer, the Reverend Matthew Nikoloff, the Reverend Amante O'Lear, the Reverend Kwame Pitts, the Reverend Dr. Kenneth Samura, who you just heard from, his lovely wife, Mrs. Marilyn Saxon Samura, the Reverend Dana Smith, and also like to say we welcome 2 new lay people who I'm very proud to say, and that is Tom Craig and Melissa Bedell. So again, welcome aboard, and let us start our conversation. God bless you, and enjoy our workshop and enjoy assembly. God bless.